Welcome to another episode, everyone. David Termal, the leader of the Blood Family Mafia, not to be confused with BMF. This is BFM. He's the only man that had the gall to take on the Hells Angels. He declared war on the Hells Angels and went to war with them. Let's get into it.
It's led to more than 30 arrests in the last week, and more are expected. Authorities say it's a blow to the Blood Family Mafia, a street gang believed to be behind a string of violent.
Top of their list is Dave Pic-Turmel, suspected leader of the Blood Family Mafia, BFM, a gang in Quebec fighting a battle against the Hells Angels for the control of the drug trade.
August 2020, Montreal, Quebec. In the quiet hours before dawn, a black SUV rolled slowly through a residential neighborhood. The engine was kept low. The windows were dark. Inside were men who already knew who they were there to kill. A door opened. Shots rang out. By the time police arrived, a man lay dead on his own front steps. In the world of organized crime, no one needed to ask why it had happened. It was part of a war that had been quietly escalating for years. A war between the Hells Angels and a renegade crime boss who refused to bow to them. That man was Dave Termal. To the public, he would later become known as Pic-Turmel, the leader of the Blood Family Mafia. To the Hells Angels, he was something far worse. He was a man who had taken their business, stolen their soldiers, and openly challenged their control of Montreal's drug trade. In a criminal ecosystem where power is enforced through fear, Termal had done the unthinkable. He had declared war. Dave Termal did not grow up dreaming of becoming a gangster. He was born in Quebec in 1977, raised in a working-class environment that offered little in the way of opportunity. Like many young men drawn into organized crime, he found belonging in the streets. He learned early that respect was not given, it was taken, and he was willing to take it. By his late teens, Termal was already involved in drug dealing and street-level violence. But he was not content to remain a foot soldier. He watched the way older criminals operated. He saw how money moved. He learned that real power came not from carrying a gun, but from controlling the people who carried guns. In the late 2000s, Montreal's underworld was in flux. The once dominant Rizzuto crime family had been weakened by arrests and assassinations. The Hells Angels had filled the vacuum, becoming the city's primary enforcers and drug distributors. They controlled the bikers, the street gangs, and the major trafficking routes. Termal saw an opportunity. Instead of trying to fight the Hells Angels head-on, he did something smarter. He built a parallel network. He recruited street gangs. He absorbed smaller criminal crews. He created a new organization that would become known as the Blood Family Mafia. Unlike traditional mafia families, BFM was young, ruthless, and decentralized. It did not care about old rules or traditions. It cared about profit and power. Termal's genius was understanding that fear alone was not enough. Loyalty had to be bought. He paid his people well. He protected them. And when someone crossed him, he made an example of them. By the mid-2000s, BFM had become one of the most violent and feared crime groups in Montreal. But Termal's ambitions did not stop there. He wanted control over the drug trade, and that meant taking it from the Hells Angels. That was when the war truly began. Termal began poaching Hells Angels associates. Dealers who were tired of biker control were offered better terms under BFM. Enforcers who felt underpaid were given higher wages. Slowly, quietly, Termal started bleeding the Angels. They noticed. At first, the conflict was subtle. A few beatings, a few warnings. But Termal did not back down. He escalated. BFM gunmen began targeting Angels-linked dealers. Vehicles were torched. People were assaulted in public. The message was clear. This was no longer business. This was war. The Hells Angels responded the only way they knew how, with violence. Hit teams were sent. BFM members were murdered. But Termal did not retreat. He struck back harder. By 2019, Montreal was in the grip of a new biker war. Bodies were being found in parking lots, on doorsteps, in vehicles riddled with bullets. Innocent bystanders were caught in the middle. Police scrambled to keep up. At the center of it all was Dave Termal. He did not hide. He did not apologize. He moved through the city like a king, surrounded by armed guards, convinced that he was untouchable. To his followers, he was a visionary. To his enemies, he was a madman. To the Hells Angels, he was an existential threat. They had never faced anyone like him before. Turmel was not just fighting them for money, he was fighting them for dominance. He wanted to replace them, and that was something they could never allow. After Dave Turmel's Blood Family Mafia began siphoning dealers, enforcers, and territory away from the Hells Angels,
We know that the Hells Angels, evidence shows, history shows, they are no joke. Steve, they already said, when he kicked it off with the Hells Angels, they returned fire quickly and murdered a few Blood Family Mafia members. So now the war is on because this dude, David Turmel, is not backing down. He's not backing down from the Hells Angels, bro. They sending crews and hit squads at his crew, taking some of them out, but he's escalating it and returning fire, not just for money, but for dominance. Okay.
Montreal entered a period of instability that had not been seen since the collapse of the old Mafia regime. Unlike traditional organized crime families that operated in shadows, Turmel's organization thrived on visibility. Every shooting, every beating, every public confrontation was meant to send a message. A new power had arrived. The Hells Angels were not just another gang, they were an institution. For decades, they had controlled drug distribution, enforced debts, and dictated which street gangs could operate. They were used to being feared. Turmel understood something they did not expect. Fear alone was not enough to keep people loyal. Money, opportunity, and protection mattered more. That was how the Blood Family Mafia grew so fast. Street-level dealers who had been paying taxes to biker chapters suddenly found themselves offered better terms. No forced dues, higher profit margins, faster protection when problems arose. BFM became attractive not because it was safer, but because it was more profitable. And in organized crime, profit always attracts loyalty. Turmel used violence strategically. When someone defected from the Hells Angels, he made sure they were publicly protected. When someone tried to betray him, he made sure their punishment was visible. This created a perception of strength. It told the streets that BFM was not a temporary crew. It was a permanent alternative. As 2018 and 2019 unfolded, the confrontations became more direct. Hells Angels affiliated dealers were attacked. BFM stash houses were raided by bikers. Retaliation followed retaliation. The streets of Montreal turned into a chessboard of ambushes, car chases, and drive-by shootings. Police began to notice a pattern. Nearly every violent incident could be traced back to the same two groups: the Blood Family Mafia and the Hells Angels. At the center of BFM was Turmel. He rarely appeared in public without armed guards. He changed vehicles constantly. He avoided predictable routines, and yet he remained visible enough that everyone knew he was running the show. That visibility was part of his strategy. He wanted the Angels to know exactly who was challenging them. In the criminal world, that kind of defiance is rare. Most challengers try to hide. Turmel did not. He held meetings in luxury condos. He hosted parties. He projected power. To his people, he was untouchable. To the Angels, he was an insult. As the body count climbed, law enforcement struggled to keep up. Witnesses were afraid to talk. Evidence disappeared. The war was being fought in shadows. But behind those shadows, Turmel's empire was expanding. By 2020, BFM controlled a significant portion of Montreal's cocaine and fentanyl trade. They had distribution cells.
Said evidence disappeared. How did evidence disappear? They going at it, boy. They putting in work on each other. The war then kicked off. Of course, the Hells Angels are not about to back down either. So it's just up. It's up with these dudes.
In multiple neighborhoods. They had money launderers. They had connections outside the city. The Hells Angels were no longer the only force in town. That was when the Angels decided something had to be done. They did not just want to weaken Turmel. They wanted him gone. After the Blood Family Mafia had established itself as a genuine rival to the Hells Angels, the war between the two groups entered its most dangerous phase. The early days of intimidation and street-level skirmishes were over. This was now a campaign of elimination. Both sides understood that coexistence was no longer possible. Either Dave Turmel would fall, or the Hells Angels would lose their dominance over Montreal's drug economy. Turmel knew it too. By late 2019 and into 2020, his security tightened dramatically. He stopped moving alone. His inner circle became smaller. Meetings were held in rotating locations. Phones were changed constantly. Anyone who had access to him was vetted again and again. Paranoia was no longer optional. It was survival. That paranoia was justified. The Hells Angels had begun quietly assembling hit teams. These were not impulsive shooters. These were disciplined bikers and hired killers with one purpose: remove Dave Turmel from the board. The Angels had lost dealers, money, and reputation.
Wow. Getting deep. Getting deep. They done assembled different hit teams, hit squads, trained individuals. Like I said, these Hells Angels, I didn't see it. I didn't see this far. I already know, though, they're not going to back down. Man, really? You better be ready. Starting a war with a group like this, straight, structured, and organized, and extremely violent, bro. That's just, yeah, they want him gone now, feeling like he's stopping their money, he's in the way. Get rid of him. So they're assembling his squads to go take David Turmel out. I really don't know what happened. I want to see, though.
In their world, that could only be answered with blood. The first serious attempt came when a convoy believed to be transporting Turmel was ambushed. Gunfire erupted. Vehicles were damaged. One of Turmel's associates was wounded. Turmel himself was not in the car. Whether the attackers had bad intelligence or whether someone inside BFM had fed them false information remains unclear. What was clear was that the war had crossed a new threshold. Turmel responded not by retreating, but by escalating. BFM shooters began targeting Angels more aggressively. Members were followed, cornered, and attacked. Clubhouses were watched. Vehicles were torched. Every strike was designed to communicate the same message: you can't touch me without bleeding. This tit-for-tat violence destabilized the entire city's criminal ecosystem. Smaller gangs were forced to choose sides. Some aligned with the Angels out of fear. Others sided with BFM because of money. Neutrality became dangerous. In that chaos, betrayal became inevitable. One of Turmel's greatest strengths had been his ability to recruit people who felt marginalized by the Angels. But those same people were vulnerable. They had histories. They had families. They had weaknesses that could be exploited. Law enforcement and rival gangs both began pressing those pressure points. Whispers began circulating that someone close to Turmel was talking, not necessarily to police, possibly to the Hells Angels. In the criminal world, information is more valuable than bullets. Knowing where Turmel would be, who he met with, how he traveled, could make the difference between life and death. Turmel became more isolated. Trust evaporated. The circle around him shrank. Despite that, BFM continued to expand. Drug routes multiplied. Profits soared. The very thing that made Turmel powerful also made him more visible. Money attracts attention. Attention attracts danger. The Hells Angels intensified their hunt. Multiple plots were uncovered after the fact. Safe houses that had been scouted. Vehicles that had been followed. Routes that had been mapped. Turmel was not just being targeted, he was being studied. By 2021, the war had become unsustainable. Montreal was seeing a spike in homicides. Police pressure increased. Media coverage exploded. Public officials demanded action. Organized crime, usually hidden, was now impossible to ignore. And in the middle of it all stood Dave Turmel, the man who had dared to challenge the Angels. But no matter how carefully he moved, no matter how many guards he hired, the reality was brutal. You cannot fight an organization as large and experienced as the Hells Angels without eventually being touched by it. The question was no longer whether they would reach him. It was when. As the war dragged on, something began to change inside Dave Turmel himself. The fearless confidence that had once fueled his rise was being slowly replaced by exhaustion and suspicion. Years of living under constant threat had reshaped his mind. Every sound outside a door felt like an ambush. Every unfamiliar face became a potential assassin. The empire he had built was now a prison of its own. His closest lieutenants noticed it first. Meetings became shorter. Decisions became harsher. Termal stopped trusting even the people who had made Blood Family Mafia powerful.
Right. And this is what happens. This has happened to many leaders, to many bosses. You become paranoid, especially when you have a target on your back by a group like that. Like I said, yeah, no. Really? The Hells Angels? Yeah, they're going to get to you sooner or later. I'm not saying that the Blood Family Mafia were some joke because, I mean, clearly we can see they went to war with them. He went to war with them. He was unafraid. They were returning fire constantly. Pretty much started it, kicked it off. But certainly they're not as big as the Hells Angels, or as structured and organized as them, or violent. Do they have, how many hit squads do they have? Man, I don't know. I can see where this is going. I can see where this is going. I mean, the man that got paranoid, he's not trusting anyone. He's not trusting his top leaders, his lieutenants, his people, his gang. The meetings have got short. He's getting paranoid. He feels the heat. They send in hit squads and they catching up with other people, haven't caught up with him yet, mapping out his routes. He knows this. He knows the heat is. He knows. It's just a matter of time at this point. Beefing up security. Let's see.
Some of his most loyal soldiers were suddenly pushed aside, replaced by newer, less experienced men. That created instability inside BFM, the kind of instability that criminal organizations cannot survive for long. Rumors began spreading through Montreal's underworld that Termal was losing control, that his paranoia was causing fractures inside his own ranks. For the Hells Angels, this was the moment they had been waiting for. They knew they didn't need to beat him in open warfare anymore. They only needed to wait for his organization to tear itself apart. And it began to happen. Small BFM crews started acting independently. Drug shipments went missing. Money didn't arrive where it was supposed to. Some of Termel's associates quietly defected to rival groups, including the Hells Angels. They knew that when an empire begins to crack, loyalty becomes optional and survival becomes everything. Law enforcement was watching all of this closely. Police had been tracking Termal for years, but now his organization was making mistakes. Communications were sloppier, meetings were easier to trace, associates were easier to pressure. The same fear that was weakening BFM was giving investigators their opening. Termal still believed he was in control, but the truth was more brutal. He was surrounded. The war with the Hells Angels had forced him into the spotlight. The violence had brought heat, and the paranoia had destroyed the very loyalty that once protected him. By the time he realized how far things had slipped, it was already too late. The king was still standing, but the kingdom was collapsing. By the time 2021 turned into 2022, the war Dave Termal had started was no longer something he could control. The Blood Family Mafia had grown into one of the most violent crime organizations in Canada. But that growth came with a price. Every new dealer meant another potential leak. Every new enforcer meant another risk. And every dollar flowing through the network made it harder to stay invisible. The Hells Angels had not stopped hunting him. They had simply become quieter. Instead of reckless street attacks, the Angels began using patience. They mapped BFM supply chains. They studied the movements of Termel's lieutenants. They waited for mistakes. And mistakes always come when fear and paranoia take over. Termal was now living like a man under siege. He rarely slept in the same place twice. He traveled with armed escorts. He trusted almost no one. The lifestyle that had once made him feel powerful was now consuming him. At the same time, law enforcement was closing in. Montreal police, the RCMP, and federal investigators had been watching BFM for years. Wiretaps, surveillance, and informants slowly painted a picture of a criminal empire built on drugs, extortion, and murder. And at the center of that empire was Termal. The authorities did not need him to pull a trigger. They needed to prove he was the one giving the orders. In March 2023, That proof finally arrived. Turmel was arrested in Quebec in a sweeping operation targeting the Blood family Mafia. Police described him as the mastermind behind a criminal organization responsible for dozens of acts of violence, including murders, attempted murders, and large-scale drug trafficking. The man who had once walked Montreal like a king was now in handcuffs. For the hell...
Okay, so he in handcuffs. I thought it was leading to somewhere else, that they didn't caught up to him at some point and took him down. But the police got to him first. So apparently he didn't, well, I don't know. Assuming maybe he went to prison. Once they come after you and been watching you for years, they said he's been watching them for years. Once they finally crack down and put the handcuffs on you, as far as they're concerned, they have evidence against you, or they're not going to do that. But let's see. But okay, so he's in jail. He's arrested at this point, not dead. Well, let's see what happens, because I mean, their reach is far. They can get inside a prison too and get to you, of course. Let's see.
Hells Angels, it was a victory they had not expected to come from police. For law enforcement, it was the end of one of the most violent crime waves in the city's recent history. But even in prison, Turmel remained dangerous. The war he started did not end with his arrest. The Blood family Mafia fractured, but it did not vanish. Some of his followers tried to keep operating. Others flipped to rival groups. The Hells Angels moved quickly to reclaim territory. The streets remained volatile. Turmel now faced the reality he had imposed on so many others. Life behind bars, surrounded by enemies. And in that environment, reputation is everything. He was no longer just Dave Turmel. He was the man who had dared to challenge the Hells Angels. That made him famous. And in prison, fame attracts danger. Authorities placed him under strict conditions. They knew that if other inmates or biker affiliates got close to him, the violence would resume. The very war he had started on the streets was now waiting for him inside the walls. The irony was brutal. Turmel had built his power by refusing to bow to anyone, by creating a new criminal empire from the ashes of old ones. But the system he challenged, the bikers, the mafia, the prison world, was larger than any one man. In the end, his greatest strength became his greatest weakness. He believed he could outthink everyone, outgun everyone, outlast everyone. For a while, he was right. But no war ends without casualties, and no crime boss escapes forever. Dave Turmel did not just declare war on the Hells Angels. He declared war on the entire criminal order of Montreal. And the cost of that war was paid in blood, fear, and eventually, his own freedom. That is his legacy. Not a hero, not a rebel, but a man who turned a city into a battlefield and was ultimately consumed by the very violence he unleashed. Subscribe to Complete Crime.
Wow. Okay, you got a few of them. This war never ends. The Mongols versus the Hells Angels. Maybe I'll check that one out, man. I think I saw something about that, but okay. Whoa, David Turmel. He survived, at least on the street. I mean, they didn't get to him. He stayed a step ahead of the Hells Angels, apparently. Made it out with his life. I mean, he went to war with them. But yeah. See how this goes? He get charged and get locked up, and not the Hells Angels, I guess. But I mean, they have charges, they have RICOs and all that. Everybody, all these gangs do. You have to be careful. Let me know what y'all think in the comments. Blood family Mafia. David Turmel brought them all together. They went to war. They went back and forth for a while. And he was never apparently injured physically or shot up or, he had attempts upon his life. They were tracking him down. Feds got to him or whomever first. Now he's locked up and, still, I'm sure, cautious and worried about his life and his survival. Subscribe to the channel if you have not done so, please. Stay safe and stay free, people.